from ABC Hansen is as simple as it is well made. It has therefore a worldwide reputation for being a long-lasting and reliable machine which serves its users faithfully for many years. But before you start using the grinding mill, you should do what you can to ensure that the mill can function reliably. It needs to be assembled and adjusted correctly. Unfortunately, we cannot do the final adjustment for you as the grinding mill is partially dismantled before dispatch to you. During transport, the grinding stones may move out of the factory setting as a result of shaking during transport. Anyway, ABC Hansen want to help you. You should therefore follow the instructions in this video before taking the grinding mill into daily use. Take the grinding mill out of the box. Drill holes in the floor for the expansion bolts. Bolt the grinding mill supports to the floor. Mount the V-belt pulley. Don't tighten the bolts yet because the height has to be adjusted later. Unpack the motor and belt pulley. Clean and grease the motor axle with a few drops of oil to allow the V-belt pulley to slide easily into position. Mount the V-belt pulley by tapping it lightly. Place a piece of wood in between to protect the V-belt pulley. Then tighten the pivot screws. Mount the motor guide bars. Then mount the foundations and motor by means of the enclosed bolts. The V-belts between the belt pulley and motor are already around the motor axle. Place them in position. In order to ensure that the V-belt pulley is horizontal, align it with a piece of flat iron. So the transmission can function efficiently, the V-belt pulley should not only be in the correct position, it should also be sufficiently tight. Tighten the V-belt pulley with the adjusting bolts. Before loosening the wing nut, prop up the supporting arm with wooden blocks so the lower stone does not fall down. Replace the wing nut with the adjusting hand wheel. The hand wheel is used to adjust the grinding mill's two stones. The lower stone rotates and is therefore called the runner stone. The upper stone is fixed and is therefore called the stationary stone. The distance between the runner stone and the stationary stone can be adjusted with the hand wheel. Now turn the hand wheel just so much that you can both feel and hear that the runner stone moves freely and soundlessly. Check the distance between the stationary stone and the bottom by placing a finger between the ejector on the runner stone and the base. If there is not room for your finger under the ejector, place wooden blocks under the supporting arm and loosen the bolts on the side plate 5 mm. The 3 bolts which hold the grinding stones in position and the 3 adjusting bolts should then be loosened. Loosen the hand wheel. Tighten the runner stone up with the nut by the bracket. Lightly fasten the 3 bolts holding the stationary stone. Then tighten them one by one. Now fasten the side plates tightly before adjustment can commence. Tighten the hand wheel and remove the wooden blocks. Then loosen the runner stone from the stationary stone so this can be turned manually by pulling on the V-belt. Check that the V-belts remain horizontal. Mount the V-belt guard. Mount outlets. Now it's time for the crucial adjustment of the heart of the grinding mill, the grinding stones. Hundreds of years of research and development lie behind the production of these simple-looking grinding stones from Engsko. In order to gain the full benefit of the grinding mill, it is important that the grinding stones have the right qualities. On the one hand, the grain's passage through the grinding stones must be long enough for the grain to be ground as fine as you want it, but not too long, as heat generation, energy consumption, and wear must be kept at a minimum. The grinding stones must remain sharp all their life, but they must also get rid of the flour quickly. That's why our grinding stones are made of the very special combination of natural materials. Emery gives top wearing strength and keeps sharp even though it wears. Flint is almost just as hard, but flint has different qualities. We have chosen a type which forms sharp cutting edges whilst it wears. The proportion of flint to emery is carefully coordinated for a long life and optimum cutting qualities. But these kinds of stone cannot cohere by themselves. Quartz grain and a strong binding agent make the grinding stone uniform and give it increased strength. The new grinding stones will grind coarsely because they are not yet run in. The stationary and runner stone can only be laid together until the highest points of the stones meet. Between the grinding stones there will be flour which is not finely ground enough. Such grinding stones give fast passage, large capacity and medium fine flour. To achieve fine grinding, the top points must be ground off the new stones. Mount the cables. This electric motor needs thermal protection. The correct thermostats and relays must be connected. It is important that these are fitted correctly. This work must be done by an authorized electrician. You are now ready to switch the grinding mill on. Check that the runner stone runs in the direction of the arrow. Now get hold of the adjusting hand wheel and move the runner stone up so you can hear that it just touches the stationary stone. The grinding stones must now be adjusted so they are parallel. This is done by standing in front of one of the supports and pulling the eccentric. Note whether you can get the grinding stones to make a louder noise when you pull the eccentric towards you. Do this with all three supports. It must be the same kind of sound in each case. By the support where you maybe cannot get the grinding stones to make a sound, or where the sound is weaker, turn the adjusting screw a few degrees. This procedure continues until there is a constant characteristic sound by each of the three supports. In order to be quite sure, you can try both pulling and pressing the eccentric away from yourself. Tighten the three bolts holding the stationary stone. Run the grinding stones together by turning the clutch handle and turn the hand wheel until you hear a constant grinding sound. Any high spots will now be rubbed off the grinding stones. After 5 minutes, check again whether the grinding stones are parallel and repeat the adjustment if necessary. When the grinding stones are parallel, carry out a half-hour run-in of the grinding stones. As the stones gradually get worn and the grinding sound disappears, the grinding stones should be tightened up. Now loosen the clutch handle and hand wheel and let the grinding stones run freely for about 10 minutes in order to cool them. Check that the grinding stones are still parallel. Only allow people who are familiar with the grinding mill to regulate the settings. Tighten the clutch handle and hand wheel again until you can hear a constant grinding sound. Grind for a further half hour. Turn the runner stone free of the stationary stone and stop the mill. Mount the guard plate, feeder and feed hopper. When mounting the feeder, make sure that the rocking plate is on the right side of the eccentric, i.e. the nylon plate must touch the eccentric. Start the grinding mill. The grinding mill is now ready for use. Pour the grain into the feed hopper. Push the clutch handle into the production setting away from the grinding mill. If the flour is too coarse, draw the grinding stones closer together or reduce the capacity. It is the interplay between the two which decides the fineness of the grain. If there is a characteristic smell of stone, the grinding stones are too close together and they should be loosened with the hand wheel. The grinding mill must not be loaded with more amperes than stated on the motor. The best way to ensure this is by building an ampere meter into the motor cabinet. During production, the grinding stones are heated up. They expand during heating, and it may be necessary to adjust the fastening of the hand wheel. When turning the grinding mill off, turn the capacity setting hand wheel. No grain can now enter. As soon as you can hear the stones grind against one another, loosen them by pushing the clutch handle in towards the grinding mill. Let the grinding mill run idle for a few minutes to ensure that as much flour as possible is blown out of the grinding mill. Now you can turn it off. Apart from adjustment and setting, the grinding mill does not require much maintenance. The two bearings should be greased with a few squirts from the grease gun for every 200 hours of running. At the same time, check that the V-belts are tight. If not, tighten them. When the temperature of the ground floor rises, it is a sign that the grinding stones are worn and need to be dressed. Another sign is that the machine uses more amperes for the same number of kilos per hour. The stationary stone must be demounted to dress the stones. This is done as follows. First, demount the guard plate by the inlet and feed hopper. Demount the side plates. Place wooden blocks under the support arm so the runner stone does not fall down. Demount the hand wheel and clutch handle. Demount the 3 bolts holding the stationary stone in position. Mount 3 eye bolts above the stationary stone and lift the stationary stone off. Dressing can be done whilst the runner stone is fitted on the grinding mill. You can also demount it if you wish. To loosen the runner stone from the axle, lift it up until there is a slight tension in it. Give the eccentric a few taps with a hammer. Place a wooden block between for protection. The runner stone will then be free of the axle and can be lifted off. A grinding stone can grind for about 400 hours, but this figure varies according to the quality of the raw material and the capacity. A grinding stone can be dressed 6 to 10 times. A worn grinding stone is unevenly worn and must first be evened up. In order to find the highest point, smear some red paint on a straight-edged piece of wood. Rub this over the grinding stones in circular movements. This will leave red marks on the highest point. Afterwards, assemble the mill and readjust it as shown previously. The grinding mill is now ready for renewed production. We can manufacture a good grinding mill. We cannot grind the flour for you or maintain and adjust the grinding mill. But if you are careful when adjusting the grinding stones and in carrying out the small amount of maintenance required, the grinding mill will serve you faithfully and reliably for many years, as it does every day for thousands of users all over the world.